rest of that? The answer is no. We're not going to give up state secrets, but we are going to have an audit. And I am convinced that many of our departments in our agencies of federal government will not stand scrutiny. And actually, I can tell you that from my standpoint, the Department of Education is probably not going to stand that scrutiny. We probably should abolish it. I do not believe the federal government should be involved in education. We'll talk about education in a minute. So these various other agencies that we will look at, and yes, it will take some pain. We know that. But I believe that the United States people, if you have a problem, you need to address it on a three-step process. The first step is to say and recognize that you have a problem. I think we're there now. I think we have gotten people's attention, financially, etc. So I think we're there. The second thing is you have to explain it in truth. You have to explain it using real statistics and real explanations. That's what Governor Gary Johnson and I do. You're not going to hear that from Mr. Obama, certainly. You're not going to hear that from Mr. Romney either. But we are going to give honest information to our people, just like the audit, etc. And the third step is people are going to have to share the pain. And I'm convinced that people in our country will do that. We've done it before, we'll do it again. But only if each person believes that their neighbors are doing the same thing. So this can and will happen. So that talks about the economy. If you're not interested and concerned about the job market, you should be. Jobs is critically important. Our unemployment rates are enormously high. In fact, they're not nearly as high, they're not reported as high as they actually are, because there are numbers of people in our society that stop looking for jobs, and so we stop reporting them as being jobless. What are we going to do with regard to jobs? Well, you have heard, I'll bet you, all of you, various ads from Romney, various ads on television and radio from Obama. Have you? Have any of you heard any specifics, any ideas at all, not only with regard to jobs, but anything else? Because I have. I have heard an ad with President Clinton, and he excoriates Romney because he talks about, well, Romney will give tax breaks, and they talk about nibbling away here at taxes or increasing taxes there. And I agree with Mr. Clinton with regard to that. And then you know what he says? Maybe some of you have seen this ad. I've seen it at least twice. He says, oh, President Obama has a plan. He's going to strengthen the middle class. Really? He's been president for 3 and something years. Why hasn't he done it yet? What is it? Why aren't we doing it now? And the answer to that is he's pandering again to the voters. He just wants to get reelected. He doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have a clue. But we do. That is, we're going to repeal the income tax. Now, think about it. This is not a radical thing to do. This is going back to our roots before 1913 in our country. We did, with the passage of the 16th Amendment, we did not have an income tax. Now, this isn't kind of intellectual gobbledygook. This is really fundamentally pragmatic, good, practical stuff. First of all, you have to understand that somewhere the General Accountability Office estimates that we in our country, as individuals and companies, spend somewhere between $260 and $600 billion every year keeping records for income taxes and preparing our income tax returns. All of that money would be saved even before you start talking about the taxes you would pay. And by the way, we would replace it with what we call a retail consumption tax, basically like a sales tax on retail goods and services. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the big thing is, with regard to jobs, your purse, your cell phone, the shoes on your feet, you know, all of these various products, before you buy them, have paid taxes on them in our country. They have a competitive disadvantage. When you take these goods and you take them off to other countries as exports, they are competing with goods that have not paid taxes on them. So our goods have a competitive disadvantage. Same thing with regard in reverse. When you have goods coming from other countries, be it from Singapore or Chile or Japan, whatever, have not paid taxes on them, competing with our domestic goods that have, and then everybody pays the same sales taxes once again, our goods have a competitive disadvantage. If you repeal the income tax, then all of the products have the same advantage. We level the playing field, and then they all pay that same consumption tax at the end. I was on an airplane again recently with a man who I was talking with about this issue. He turns out that he is an executive from Nike, you know, the shoe manufacturer. He looked at me, his eyes got really big, and he said, Judge Gray, you don't understand. If we were to repeal the income tax, most companies would bring their manufacturing back know what that means? Millions of jobs. It's a reverse outsourcing. You can't, in Washington, you're good at this. You try to pass laws to keep outsourcing from occurring. You cannot repeal the law of supply and demand. Sorry to tell you that. It simply doesn't work. But you can make an institutional change that will make our goods more competitive. We will bring jobs back to the United States of America. This is what we will do. There are four groups of people that do not like this idea. Who would they be? Well, first of all, somewhat obviously, tax accountants, tax attorneys, H&R Block probably does not like this idea. I understand. I think we can live with that. Second group of people that's similar. It's the people that work for the IRS. Okay, I think we can stand with that as well. But the third group of people is big, really powerful, really adamant, and those are members of Congress. Okay? These are people that get a lot of political power by voting for tax breaks for their wealthy constituents, and then, of course, that turns into a whole bunch of power for them. This is something big. We're going to have, when we win this election, we're going to have to go over their heads to the voters, because if one of the members of Congress does not vote for the repeal of the income tax, we're going to tell the voters, your representative, he or she, is putting their interests ahead of yours. We're going to have to go talk to your representatives. I think that will happen. And the fourth group of people, of course, are those wealthy constituents that are getting these tax breaks. They're not paying their taxes, etc. You might think general electric if you want to, but those are the people that are out there that have mastered the system, and they have their lobbyists and everything, and they don't want to change it because they've mastered it. And by the way, I'm told, without knowing, but I'm told that about 60% of the lobbyists that are now in Washington would be out of work if, in fact, we repeal the income tax, because that is so big a deal with them. So these are things we need to do. But what are we going to replace it with? We would bring in a consumption tax at the retail level, not value added each step of the way, but a retail sales tax, a retail tax, basically like a sales tax. And what would that be? It's not going to be minor. I'm going to tell you the truth. Let's say it would be 20%. I don't think it would be that high, but it fits in with regard to a discussion using round numbers. First of all, if you work, you're going to have a payroll check that's not going to have any withholding at all. Federal income tax, or Social Security, all of this will be paid by the consumption tax, so you're going to have a lot more money in your pocket to begin with, and that's a good thing. You go to a vending machine here on campus, and today you buy a can of Coca-Cola or something, say you put $1 into the vending machine, of that dollar, probably 15 to 20 cents is sheer taxes in itself on that product for the reasons we discussed. So, with competition, the price would come down to 80 cents or 85 cents or something to begin with, and then if you have that consumption tax on top of that, you'll still end up with basically the same dollar, so it won't really hurt you that much. So, you would be able to have more money in your pocket to begin with. But what about the poor? And I'm concerned about that. People would say, oh, it's regressive, you're going to harm the poor, and I understand. Governor Gary Johnson says, and he's right, that we would have a rebate every month, for example, for every adult in our country, Bill Gates on down, and say if they spend, the rebate would be $200 a month. You would have a credit. So if you're poor, or for example, if you spend $1,000 a month on goods and services, 20% of that is $200, you'd end up paying no taxes. You pay more than that every dollar you spend, of course, you would pay 20 cents on that tax. If you pay less than that, you actually end up making money on the deal. So the poor will be taken care of in that fashion. Otherwise, it's no big secret. People that have money tend to spend more money than people that don't, so they would pay more taxes. So this is what we would propose. We will repeal the income tax, actually go back to our roots. I think Thomas Jefferson and James Madison would be very pleased, and actually cut away a whole bunch of bureaucracy, a whole bunch of administration, a whole bunch of fraud that is now going on with regard to our taxes, and it will make our lives much more straightforward, much more equitable for everyone. So that's a thumbnail approach with regard to that second issue of jobs. Third issue of education. And then I will take your questions, because that's a lot more fun. And I haven't gotten interrupted yet. Don't be bashful, particularly on Tuesdays. I don't bite on Tuesdays, and you got lucky.